As of June 8th of this year, Riot announced that Split would be leaving competitive queues for both ranked and unrated game modes. These changes go into effect starting in episode 5, and the reaction from the community as well as pro players and content creators alike was met with notable distaste. But there's actually a lot more going on behind Split's removal, and it has a lot more to do with the map's design itself. Welcome back to Esports Driven. We're going to be documenting the true reason for Split's removal, as well as how this might affect future maps in Valorant. Let's look at what Riot had to say on the matter. An excerpt from their article, Valorant Map Pool Changes, states that after careful consideration that looked at player sentiment, time since release, and future planned updates, Split was the unlucky contender to receive the banhammer. It's obvious that Riot wants to maintain the competitive integrity by limiting how many maps the average player has to memorize, but many people across social media are begging for its return. So was this truly a mistake on Riot's end? We're going to be offering an explicit, in-depth run-through of why Split is actually the perfect contender for removal. And not only that, but what kind of map it may even look like months from now. The fundamental problem that has plagued Split's playability since its debut back in beta has always been the ridiculous corridors and hallways attackers must tread through initially. Of the few places you're allowed to go on Split, you're forced into a choke point that too often feels like an uphill battle. I'd even go as far as to say that there's only 3 real lanes featured on Split, and I'll be using this helpful diagram to elaborate on this. Starting with B-site. You essentially get to walk up about 10 meters before you're faced with a very tall task of getting out of garage. Attackers are not offered the traditional 2-route system that's featured on just about every map. For example, binds, A-short, and showers. The 2 aforementioned lanes on bind at least give the attackers some counterplay to being utility spammed at the choke point by being able to pressure 2 areas at once, or simply by baiting utility at the one side and rotating vice versa. Split, on the other hand, does not have another way to get into B without getting into B heaven first, which is completely separate and far away lane that makes doing a split push very challenging. This brings us to the most infamous aspect of Split's play cycle, and that's the bottom mid area. Now, I really want to separate this map's mid with something like Breeze's mid, which is infinitely more competent and fair to attacker side. With Breeze's mid, the defenders get no initial control, besides the ability to hold long angles from a safe distance. There's no ridiculous rat spots, no oppressive crossfires, and the only choke points are right at the site's entrances and exits. For example, these smokes I've placed are strategically solvent for what both sides want to accomplish across a round. Now, with Split's mid, for some reason, it's able to fully be smoked or mollied with one charge. This applies to just about every AoE ability in the game, and it's even harder to traverse against controllers and sentinels specifically. Seeing a Sage wall put up mid every round is about as common as the inability to get more than 3 rounds on the attacker side. Combined with smokes and AoE stall abilities, you'd think there'd be a bomb site just ahead of it, but it really just boils down to another way to bully the attacker's side while they scramble to get remotely close to a site. Finally, A site. This site is far too big when you need to find defenders, but also far too small when your team needs to push up for map control. Right off the rip, a defender can smoke off the only angle you and your team can walk in from. From there, a 3-way crossfire including CT, ramp, and heaven can be made. If you manage to get out of that smoke, 2 new challenges arise. If you push A main, then there's a deadly vertical 50-50 that needs to be cleared on the close left. Take another step, and there could be someone behind the map, someone backside, and then behind the flower pot. All of this has to be cleared assuming smokes are down, otherwise you can add heaven and CT to this list too. If you instead push from the ramp, you're facing an uphill battle against the defenders rotating from CT and from vents. The issue comes down to all your teammates needing to funnel into that A main choke point to trade each other. There can't be any support from a teammate that's in main or on ramp. So what often goes down is the attackers get slowed, smoked, and flashed from multiple angles at once with no cover to back them up. Here are my suggestions for how we could improve Split. To start simple, you could move the attacker bi-phase barriers into a more comfortable position. For mid-market, the bi-phase wall would be moved up to the edge of the doorway instead of about 10 meters back. This lets the attackers beat the defenders to the first peak and lets them scale up further into the opening seconds. The vent's wall would follow suit and flush with the exit. To remove the infamous mid choke point this cubby showcased here would be removed, and the left wall would continue up into the mailroom diagonally. This change makes it so a single smoke won't completely shut down vision into vents and mailroom. For B-side, I would add smooth stairs starting at the back wall to the right of CT doorway. This allows attackers to get into a new position and access deeper into heaven without having to go up the rope, which is usually suicide. For A-side, we're going to do the same thing. Remove the rafter that eclipses the hell position and add a rope that lets you climb up to rafters. This allows heaven to be aggressively taken by all agents, not just ones with vertical mobility. This does two extra things too. It removes the horrid vertical 50-50 we discussed earlier, where so many poor souls have been taken by a judge. But it also helps the defenders, as hell is a lot easier to clear during a retake, and there's no drop sound if you choose to climb down the rope. All of these aforementioned map changes are just opinions and completely based on our subpar map experiences. But I hope this guide has given you a deeper look into what could have been the real reason for Split's removal in episode 5. If you enjoy this content, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you want to watch more, check out our previous video where we discuss the hilariously ineffective Sage Wall plant strategy you see far too often on Icebox B site. Anyway guys, thanks for watching and we'll catch you in the next one.